Imagine a summer morning in an American town sometime in the late 19th century. Before sunrise, the streets are quiet. Then, in the distance, something begins to happen. The sound of wagons, the pounding of horses, men shouting to one another, canvas being unloaded. And then, slowly, the town begins to realize what has arrived: a circus. By noon, the streets are crowded. Children run alongside enormous wagons. Adults gather to watch elephants being led through town. Posters cover buildings and fences, promising wonders that most people have never seen before. And somewhere nearby, beneath an enormous canvas tent, hundreds of performers, animals, musicians, laborers, and showmen are preparing for one of the greatest spectacles America had ever known. This was the world that would eventually produce a name recognized around the world. But the story of that circus began long before the name ever appeared. The American circus tradition reaches back to the closing years of the 18th century. In the 1790s, English equestrian John Bill Ricketts established some of the earliest modern circuses in the United States. Even George Washington was among those who watched circus performances. At first, the circus was relatively simple. There were horses, acrobats, jugglers, clowns, equestrian performers, and daring feats designed to make audiences gasp. But the American circus was about to become something much larger. In 1825, Joshua Purdy Brown introduced an innovation that would change the traveling show forever: the circus tent. Instead of performing only in permanent buildings or temporary outdoor arenas, a circus could now arrive in a town, raise its own enormous pavilion, perform before thousands of people, tear it down, and move on. The circus had become mobile, and America was a perfect country for it. The nation was expanding westward. New towns were appearing. Railroads were beginning to connect distant cities, and millions of Americans were hungry for entertainment. But one of the most important figures in this story was not originally a circus owner. His name was Phineas Taylor Barnum. P.T. Barnum was born in Connecticut in 1810. He was an extraordinary promoter, businessman, and showman. But Barnum understood something that would become the foundation of modern entertainment. People don't simply buy entertainment. They buy the promise of an experience. Barnum became famous through his American Museum in New York City. Inside were animals, curiosities, performers, scientific exhibits, historical displays, and attractions that promised visitors something they had never seen before. Barnum understood advertising better than almost anyone of his generation. Huge posters, sensational claims, strange attractions, constant publicity. He turned curiosity into a business. But eventually Barnum moved from the museum business into the circus. In 1871, he joined forces with showman William Cameron Coop and performers Dan Costello and others to create a massive traveling spectacle. Its name was almost as enormous as the show itself: P.T. Barnum's Great Traveling Museum, Menagerie, Caravan, and Hippodrome. It wasn't simply a circus. It was a traveling world of entertainment. There were animals, performers, museum exhibits, musicians, parades, and spectacular productions. Barnum's organization eventually helped establish the phrase that would become legendary: the greatest show on earth. But behind the flamboyant Barnum stood another man who was almost his complete opposite. His name was James Anthony Bailey. Barnum was the public personality. Bailey was the organizer. Barnum understood publicity. Bailey understood logistics, and logistics were becoming increasingly important. Imagine trying to move hundreds of people, dozens or even hundreds of animals, enormous quantities of equipment, tents, wagons, food, costumes, props, and everything else necessary for a gigantic traveling show. Every town men know the logistical minds of the circus business. In fact, his organizational methods were so impressive that they later attracted attention beyond entertainment. Bailey had his own successful circus. It was known as the
Cooper and Bailey Circus, created with James E. Cooper. And for a time, Cooper and Bailey became serious competitors to Barnum. Then came the decision that would change American entertainment. In 1881, Barnum and Bailey combined their operations. The resulting.
The circus takes to the railroad. The railroad changed America. It also changed the circus. Instead of moving enormous quantities of equipment slowly by horse-drawn wagon from one town to another, circuses could load their operations onto railroad cars. The Ringlings began traveling by train in 1888. That changed everything. The circus could become larger. It could travel farther. It could perform in more towns. And it could maintain a schedule that would have been almost impossible with wagons alone. But there was another advantage. The Ringlings became masters of routing. John Ringling in particular developed a reputation for carefully planning where the circus would travel. Rather than constantly fighting competitors for the same audiences, the Ringlings could move into smaller or neglected towns. They could arrive where another circus wasn't. Then they would move on. The Wisconsin Historical Society notes that John Ringling's skillful routing helped the circus avoid direct competition and expand its audience. The brothers divided responsibilities among themselves. One handled publicity, another advertising, another selected acts, another produced the show, another handled finances, and John concentrated on transportation. It was a family business, but it was becoming a very large one. By the 1890s, Barnum and Bailey and the Ringling Brothers were among the most important circus organizations in America. They were competitors, but the Ringlings were growing rapidly. In 1895, the Ringlings decided to move into New England, traditionally strong territory for Barnum and Bailey. Rather than engage in a disastrous head-to-head battle, the two organizations agreed to divide the country. The Ringlings established themselves strongly in the Midwest and Chicago. Barnum and Bailey remained centered around New York. For several years, the arrangement allowed both shows to prosper. But eventually, the balance of power would change. Barnum's final years. P.T. Barnum died in 1891. He had spent decades turning curiosity into entertainment and entertainment into an enormous business. But the circus he helped create continued. James Bailey carried on the enterprise. Bailey eventually took the Barnum and Bailey Circus to Europe. Beginning in 1897, the show embarked on a 5-year European tour. The circus traveled through Britain and other parts of Europe, demonstrating that the American traveling spectacle could compete on an international stage. When the circus returned to America in 1902, the competitive landscape had changed. The Ringling Brothers had expanded, and they were no longer a small Wisconsin circus. They were becoming an entertainment empire. But James Bailey died in 1906. His death removed one of the great organizers of the American circus. But the Barnum and Bailey show continued. Then, in 1907, the Ringling Brothers made their most important acquisition. They purchased the Barnum and Bailey Circus. For the moment, however, they did not immediately combine the two operations. They operated them as separate circuses. The two great names continued traveling. Two enormous shows, two massive organizations. But now they belonged to the same family. The Ringlings had effectively won the great circus rivalry. By the early 20th century, the circus had become an extraordinary traveling city. A circus wasn't simply performers arriving in town. It could involve thousands of people, animals, train crews, performers, cooks, mechanics, carpenters, electricians, ticket sellers, musicians, clowns, animal handlers, publicists, managers, and countless workers whose names rarely appeared on posters. The trains themselves became spectacles, Long lines of railroad cars carried the circus from city to city. At one stop, the show might be performing before thousands of people. A few hours later, the tents came down, the equipment was loaded, the animals were moved, the trains departed, and the entire city on wheels disappeared into the night. Then, somewhere down the railroad line, another town woke up to discover that the circus had arrived. 1919. The two great shows become one. The First World War changed America. Transportation became more difficult. Labor became harder to find. Many young men left civilian jobs to serve in the military. Running two enormous circuses separately became increasingly difficult. So in 1919, the Ringlings finally combined the two great names. On March 29, 1919, the Ringling Bros and Barnum and Bailey combined shows made its debut in New York City. The two great American circus traditions had finally become one. The Ringling Brothers, Barnum, Bailey, and generations of performers, animal trainers, acrobats, clowns, musicians, equestrians, managers, and laborers were now part of one extraordinary traveling institution. The name would become legendary: Ringling Bros and Barnum and Bailey Circus, the greatest show on earth. But perhaps the most remarkable part of the story wasn't what happened beneath the big top. It was what happened outside it. The circus traveled. It traveled through cities, small towns, industrial communities, farming towns, railroad centers. Across the Midwest, across the East, across the South, across the American West, and eventually across oceans. Everywhere it went, it brought a glimpse of another world. A child in a small town might never have seen an elephant before. Never seen a trapeze artist, never seen an acrobat fly through the air. Never seen a performer balance on horseback, never seen thousands of people gathered together for entertainment. Then one morning the circus arrived, and suddenly, the impossible seemed to be sitting on the edge of town. The people behind the posters. We often remember Barnum, we remember Bailey, we remember the Ringling Brothers, we remember Jumbo. But the circus was never created by a handful of famous men alone. It was created by thousands. Performers who spent their lives mastering extraordinary skills. Animal trainers, equestrians, acrobats, musicians, clowns, stagehands, tent crews, railroad workers, cooks, mechanics, ticket sellers, and families who sometimes spent generations living on the road. They were the people who transformed an empty field into a temporary city. They built the tent, prepared the animals, cooked the meals, sold the tickets, performed the show, tore everything down, loaded the trains, and started all over again. The legacy. The circus eventually changed. Movies arrived, then radio, then television. Then a new generation of entertainment competed for the public's attention. But the great circus had already changed American culture. It had shown the power of spectacle. It had demonstrated the importance of publicity. It had transformed entertainment into a national business. And it helped create the idea that a show could become bigger than the place where it was performed. The circus could travel to the audience. The audience didn't have to travel to the circus. And that may be the most important legacy of all. From the small tents of the 19th century, to enormous railroad trains, to packed city streets, to the world's great exhibition grounds. The American circus became a moving city of dreams. It was loud, it was colorful, it was sometimes dangerous, it was controversial, it was enormous. But for generations of Americans, the arrival of the circus meant one thing. For a few hours, ordinary life could disappear. The canvas went up. The band began to play. The lights came on. The animals entered the ring. The performers climbed into the air. And somewhere outside the tent, another generation of children stood watching in wonder. The story that began with America's earliest traveling circuses eventually became the story of Barnum and Bailey.
the Ringling brothers. And finally, Ringling Bros and Barnum and Bailey.